My name is William Carter, and at 68 years old, I never expected my own family to try to drown me. 3 months after my heart surgery, I was finally feeling strong enough to attend our annual family barbecue at my lake house. What should have been a celebration became the day I realized my grandson, my son, and my daughter-in-law were counting down the days until my death. What they didn't know was why I could barely hold back my determination to prove them wrong. Tyler, my 16-year-old grandson, had been acting strange all summer. Where once he brought me dandelions like they were gold, now he barely looked up from his phone. Michael, my 45-year-old son, seemed more interested in discussing property values than asking about my recovery. And Jessica, my daughter-in-law, kept making comments about retirement communities and how much easier life would be with less responsibility. The afternoon started normally enough. I was grilling burgers trying to keep the conversation light. Tyler was showing off for his friends, acting tough the way teenagers do when they want to impress someone. But then something shifted. Maybe it was the third beer Jessica handed him, or maybe it was just the cruelty that had been building inside him for months. "Hey, Grandpa," he called out, walking toward me with that grin I used to find charming. "Why don't you cool off?" Before I could react, his hands were on my shoulders and suddenly I was airborne. The shock of hitting the cold water knocked the breath from my lungs. My chest seized up, my shoulders screamed with pain, and panic flooded through me as I realized I couldn't get my bearings. "Don't be so dramatic, Grandpa!" Tyler laughed as I thrashed in the water, desperately trying to reach the surface. 16 years old, and he treated my drowning like entertainment. I looked toward the dock, gasping for air, expecting to see someone jumping in to help. Instead, I saw Michael standing with his arms folded, watching like this was some kind of show. Jessica raised her wine glass like she was toasting my struggle. Not one of them moved. Not one hand reached out. They let me choke and flail while the water filled my lungs. I was too old, too weak after surgery, and they looked at me like I was nothing. That was the moment I realized they weren't waiting for me to survive. They were waiting to see if I would sink. But they forgot something crucial about me. I don't sink. I endure. And that day, as I clawed my way to the dock's edge, something fundamental changed inside me. The stubborn breath of a man who's been underestimated one time too many kept me fighting. When my head finally broke the surface, coughing and sputtering, I heard Tyler call out, "Guess you can swim after all. Tough old man." The laughter that followed was worse than the water in my lungs. It echoed across the lake as if the whole world had chosen sides against me. I dragged myself up onto the dock, my knees scraped raw, my clothes heavy with lake water and betrayal. No hand came down to help me, no towel was offered, no word of concern was spoken. Just silence and smirks. I didn't speak. I didn't ask why. I simply stood there, dripping sip of breath, ragged, and walked past them all. Past the grill, smoking with burgers no one offered me. Past the folding chairs where they lounged as though nothing had happened. My wet footsteps left a trail across the deck, but not one of them followed. That night, after the house had gone still and the guests had left, I sat at my desk under a small lamp. Sleep wouldn't come. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Tyler's smirk, heard his laugh. And worse, I saw Michael standing there, silent and complicit. How had we gotten here? When had I become so disposable to my own family? But as the darkness deepened, something inside me hardened like steel. I realized I had a choice. I could keep playing the role they had written for me, quiet, compliant, convenient, or I could pick up the pen and write my own ending. They thought they were watching me sink, but they hadn't seen anything yet. That was the beginning of the end of their control over my life. The morning after the barbecue, I found myself standing in front of the old guitar, leaning against the corner of the living room. The strings were dusty, one of them long since snapped, but I still remembered the day I brought it home. Tyler was 10. His eyes lit up like I had just handed him the moon. He sat cross-legged on the floor, strumming clumsy chords, and told me, "Grandpa, this is better than Christmas." Now, years later, the same boy had shoved me into a lake and laughed while I fought for breath. I reached out, ran my fingers across the rough wood, and felt the weight of both memories pressing down at once. The joy of the past, the sting of the present. That guitar was more than an instrument. It was a reminder of every sacrifice I had made to give him a chance at something better. When Tyler was 6, Michael had lost his job. Jessica was restless, already complaining about money, about being stuck. They dropped Tyler off at my house for a few weeks. Those few weeks became months. Months became years. By the time Tyler was in middle school, I was the one signing his report cards, sitting through parent-teacher conferences, and paying for his braces. I didn't mind. I told myself it was my duty, my blessing even. Back then, Tyler would crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, clutching his blanket, whispering, "Don't let go, Grandpa." And I never did. Not once. But somewhere between that frightened little boy and the young man who stood on the dock yesterday, something changed. The year he turned 16, he stopped looking me in the eye, stopped saying thank you, stopped joining me at the table for breakfast. The night after I wrote my first line in that journal, I couldn't sleep. The words stared back at me in the glow of the lamp. They will never get the chance to drown me again. I closed the book, but the silence in my room pressed heavily against me. Sleep wouldn't come. Not when my head was filled with their laughter. Tyler's smirk. Michael's folded arms. Jessica's glass of wine. So instead, I pulled out the drawer of my desk and opened my old laptop. The screen lit up, slowly wheezing to life like even the machine was tired of being ignored. I typed in my password, something Tyler would never guess, an old Army serial number from when I was barely older than he is now. For years, I had kept neat digital ledgers of everything. Not because anyone asked me to, but because it mattered to me to know exactly where my money was, where my time went, what I had built for this family. Click by click, I scrolled through the folders. Bank accounts, bonds, the education fund I had started when Tyler was 10, back when he still looked at me like I was a hero. There it was, $50,000 untouched. A foundation for his future, I used to call it. A future I once believed he would build with decency. Now it felt like an anchor tied around my ankle. The house was quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of floorboards. I thought I was alone, but then I heard it. Tyler's voice, low muffled, drifting down the hallway. I paused, hands frozen on the keyboard. "College fund's basically mine," he was saying. My stomach clenched. I eased the laptop shut, careful not to make a sound, and listened harder. His voice carried through the thin wall between my room and the living room, where he had probably collapsed on the couch again. "Once the old man's gone, Dad says it's set. That's like, what, 50 grand easy. I'll transfer once he's out of the picture." My blood turned cold. Out of the picture. That's what I was to him. A picture. Something to be removed, discarded, hung on a wall if convenient, but erased when it cluttered the space. I sat back in my chair, hands trembling, not from age this time, but from the shock of hearing my grandson plot my absence like it was nothing more than a math problem. For years, I had blamed myself for his change. Maybe I was too soft, too patient, too willing to overlook small slights. But in that moment, I understood Tyler didn't just slip away. He was pulled, shaped, taught by a father who never learned accountability. Then I heard Michael's voice join the conversation. We need to think about placement, too. He's becoming a liability. Jessica's been looking into facilities. The sooner we get him settled somewhere, the cleaner the transition will be. Liability. That word settled in my chest, heavier than the lake water had. I wanted to storm in. Wanted to remind them of the nights I stayed up with Tyler's asthma, of the checks I wrote to keep the roof over their heads. But I didn't. Instead, I reached for my phone and dialed a number I had kept in my wallet for years. Thomas Anderson Law Office. A crisp voice answered. This is William Carter. I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. I need an appointment. When I hung up, I looked toward the living room where their voices continued plotting my future. Time to lock the doors that don't exist. Thomas Anderson's office smelled like paper and consequence. Not the stale kind, but the kind that says everything you sign here will outlive the people who think they can outlast it. The windows faced east, taking a slice of late morning sun and laying it across a row of framed degrees. His receptionist, a calm woman with steel gray hair and a nameplate that read Nora Vance, walked me in, offered water, and closed the door behind me with a soft click that felt like a seal. Thomas stood. Mr. Carter, he said, crossing the rug with a hand already extended. I'm Anderson. Thank you for coming on short notice. His handshake wasn't perfunctory. It was steady, dry, present, the kind that makes you feel seen without being studied. I realized how long it had been since I had shaken a hand that didn't want something. Call me William, I said. Or Bill, if that makes it easier to tell me hard things. He smiled the way good lawyers do. Kindness wrapped around an unblinking kernel of truth. All right, Bill. Please. He gestured to a chair. Let's talk. I sat. The leather didn't creak. I liked that. He didn't ease in. You mentioned on the phone you have a grandson, Tyler, and that there's an education fund in your name. 50,000, I said. Set aside when he was 10. Untouched. He nodded, already knowing which told me Frank had told him enough to start. Thomas opened a thin folder. I saw my signatures, copied, their dates I remembered like birthdays. Is access still solely yours? He asked. Yes. I swallowed. They assume otherwise. His eyes lifted. Assume how? My grandson told someone it's his. My son Tyler's father speaks like the future's already written. My daughter-in-law uses words like liability. I forced the word out. Even here it tasted like metal. Thomas didn't write that down. He let the word hang where it belonged in the room between us. Okay, he said softly. Then there are two conversations we can have. One is about money. The other is about boundaries. They look similar on paper. Which one keeps me breathing? I asked. Both, he said. He clicked a pen. The quiet sound felt ceremonial. First, he said, let's lock the front doors that don't exist. He turned his notepad so I could see his list forming. We'll audit every account. We'll move anything that requires your signature into a structure that doubles the friction. No electronic signature without 48 hours notice. No online access without an in-person token. We'll add alerts so any inquiry on your accounts pings me. We'll set your credit to frozen at all 3 bureaus. We'll get you a safe deposit box at a credit union under your key only. It was clinical, clean, and lawful. It calmed me in a way the lake never could. And second, I asked. He held my eyes. We draw your life in ink the way you want it lived. Power of attorney, medical and financial, to someone you trust. Healthcare directive witnessed. A revised will with a no contest clause. A letter of intent I will read to any interested party at your request. I want Frank Morrison as my healthcare proxy, I said. And if he can't, Nora next. Not Michael, not Jessica. Thomas wrote, then paused, then wrote more. He didn't ask why. He didn't need to. He flipped to a fresh page. Tell me about Tyler. I did. Not everything. Enough. The guitar, the asthma attacks, the dandelions, the shove. When I finished, Thomas's pen hadn't moved for a long time. He let the silence land. I'm sorry, he said. It wasn't perfunctory either. I don't want revenge, I said. I want protection. His mouth curved. Then we'll structure the protection one piece at a time. He tapped the first list with his pen. I'll have my office call the credit bureaus today. You'll stop at Greenwood Credit Union after you leave me and open a safe deposit box. We'll set a post office box. You'll change your primary phone on file with banks to a number only you and I have. And the fund itself? I asked. You tell me, he said. Close it, redirect it, freeze it, or... He lifted a brow. Let it sit where it is while you watch what people do when they think time is on their side. I want to watch, I said. The words were colder than I expected them to be. I want to see how they treat me when they think I'm leaving, but I'm the one choosing the door. Then we leave it, he said, and we build the room around it. He scribbled a title on the page. The Room. It made me smile despite myself. There's one more thing we should discuss, Thomas said, sliding a pamphlet across the desk. Capacity screening. Not mandatory, but if you want to preempt their narrative, we invite a neutral evaluator to meet you here. If anyone says facility again, I can fax a sentence. Mr. Carter demonstrates decisional capacity. I like seatbelts, I said. Good, he said. We'll buckle more. Nora knocked, poked her head in politely. Bureaus are on hold, she told Thomas, then glanced toward me. Can I make you copies of your ID now, Mr. Carter? When the door closed, Thomas said, Bill, I want to share something you should know. I pulled the inquiry history on your fund. He slid a printout across the desk. Last week, someone contacted the custodian labeled as authorized family to ask about required steps in the event of incapacity. The caller ID belonged to your son. The room didn't tilt. My stomach didn't drop. The information fell into place like a piece of a machine clicking home. They didn't get anywhere, Thomas said. Your documents list no authorized family, but it tells us intent. That's enough, I said. When I got home that evening, Jessica was in the kitchen, phone pressed to her ear. Yes, I understand there are waiting lists, she was saying. But we're looking at placement options. He's becoming more of a liability each day. She saw me and smiled that polished smile. Time to see exactly what kind of fortress I had built. They turned my drowning into a party trick. It started with a laugh on the back patio, the kind that asks the room for permission to be cruel and gets it. I was in the kitchen rinsing a mug when Tyler's voice cut through the screen door like a dare. Picture this, he said loud enough to conquer the music. Grandpa goes overboard, arms flailing, mouth open. Help me, help me. A ripple of laughter, a glass clinked. Someone asked, did he really say that? Tyler didn't miss a beat. He said a lot of things. He smirked, mainly water. Another laugh, bigger this time, the kind that invites everyone to be brave by being unkind. I didn't step onto the patio. I didn't interrupt the performance. I stood still, hands wet, and let the sound wash over me without dragging me under. Tough old man, a boy's voice parroted, one of Tyler's friends, I guessed. He's fine. Tyler soaked in it. He's dramatic, he said, and I could hear Jessica's smile in the way she breathed out a soft hiss through perfect teeth. I set the mug down gently in the sink, a sound I could control. The lake hummed beyond the yard like a witness who refused to take sides. "Hey," another voice chimed in, female, unsure. "What if he'd actually—" "He didn't—" Tyler cut her off as if the facts were an inconvenience he was too clever to carry. "Besides, it's not like we don't have plans." He lowered his voice to the volume he reserves for secrets he wants to be overheard. "Once he's placed, Dad says it gets simpler. Paperwork, signatures, that kind of thing. The college fund, the house, there's a flow, you know." There it was. The math of me. But what Tyler didn't know was that someone was filming. What started as his moment of cruel comedy became something else entirely when one of his friends posted the clip online. "Watch this kid reenact pushing his grandpa in the lake," the caption read. "Hilarious family moment gone viral." By morning, the video had spread beyond Tyler's circle. Neighbors saw it. Teachers saw it. And unfortunately for Michael, his coworkers saw it too. The clip showed Tyler dramatically flailing his arms, mimicking my struggle in the water, while his friends laughed. "Picture this," he repeated for the camera. "Old man can't swim, panics like a turtle on its back. You should have seen it. Hilarious." The phone rang at 7 a.m. Michael's face went white as he answered. "Yes, sir, I understand. No, I'll come in early to discuss it." When he hung up, Jessica was already pouring coffee with shaking hands. "That was HR," Michael said quietly. "Someone forwarded them the video. They want to talk about inappropriate optics and how it reflects on the company's family values." Tyler stumbled downstairs, yawning, phone in hand. He didn't even look at me. Just grabbed a plate, scooped eggs onto it, and dropped into a chair. "Morning," I said evenly. "Yeah," he mumbled, scrolling through whatever kept him tethered to that screen more than to real people. "So people are freaking out," he announced, head thrown back, smiling like he'd been nominated for an award only he understood. "It was a joke. Can't anyone take a joke? Maybe don't post it," Michael said, heavy-lidded, trying for father and landing on tired man. "I didn't," Tyler said, indignant. "Brandon did, or someone else. I don't control what my friends think is funny." "You control your mouth," I said, not from the doorway, like a ghost, but from my chair at the table like a man who paid the taxes. Later that afternoon, there was a knock at the door. A young woman stood there, ponytail, mascara, a touch too heavy for daylight, but courage in her eyes. "Mr. Carter?" she asked, voice careful. "I'm Emma. I'm in Tyler's class. I was at the party." She hesitated, then continued. "I wanted to say I'm sorry about what he said. About the lake, it's not funny." I met her eyes. They were the age of honesty before it calcifies. "Thank you," I said. "It isn't." She nodded like someone relieved to be understood. "Some of us didn't laugh," she added softly. We wanted you to know that." Not all witnesses clap, I thought, as she walked away. By evening, the damage was spreading. Michael came home different. Not by much, but I know my son's posture, like I know the sound of our hinges. Shoulders back, jaw set. A man called into an office he thought he'd left behind in his 20s. "Someone at work saw the clip," he said. "HR wants to discuss optics and how family behavior reflects on company values." Jessica paced the kitchen like a caged lioness. "This is ridiculous," she said. "People act like they never told a story. It's our family, our business. What you do to people in your family is everyone's business," I said, almost gently. She couldn't tell if I'd affirmed her or killed the sentence. The next morning, Jessica was on the phone before I'd finished my coffee. Yes, early dinner casual. We'll invite the neighbors, put out a spread, remind everyone what a gracious family looks like. She looked at me over the phone. Damage control, she mouthed. We'll show them the real us. I almost smiled. Finally, they would. Tyler didn't knock. He hit the front door like a verdict and came in waving a plastic folder stamped financial aid. His face was the color anger makes. When it remembers, it's also afraid. We need to talk, he said, tossing the folder onto the kitchen table so hard the papers slurred. I was already sitting there. Coffee pill box, Dr. Mitchell's letter folded once and placed beside my keys, because I like objects that do exactly what they promise. Morning, I said. This isn't funny, Grandpa. He jabbed a finger at the papers. They said the fund isn't accessible. They said there's some token now. They said I need owner authorization. What is that security? I said quietly. A seatbelt. He blinked like I'd spoken another language. You set this up. Why would you make it hard for me? Because it is mine, I said, and because you are not. The sentence landed. He tried to laugh it off, a short bark that had no friends. Michael drifted in late to his parenting. What's going on? Tyler turned the folder into a flag. They're blocking the fund. Jessica came next, pulled by the smell of conflict like it was fresh bread. What do you mean blocked? She asked, stacking worry over calculation. It's for school, Tyler said, his voice climbing toward a whine he hadn't used since middle school. It's in my name, I said, as calmly as I would have named a road. It has always been in my name. Tyler slammed his palm onto the table, then caught himself. Just sign it over, he said, but the demand came out hollow. Mark's eyes flicked to me and away. He didn't say please. He didn't say don't talk to your grandfather like that. He said nothing, which was its own kind of sentence. Jessica tried to smile. It felt like a receipt. William, honey, we're just trying to keep things smooth. If the school needs an authorization, we can bring something by. Tyler rifled through the folder and produced a sheet like a magic trick. Across the top, temporary custodial access. Across the bottom, a line for my name. Don't, I said, and I didn't raise my voice to say it. Not that form, not in my house. Tyler scoffed. Why are you being difficult? I'm being exact, I said. I slid Dr. Mitchell's letter over and tapped the paper with one finger. I can decide. I will decide. I will not be decided for. He read the words the way boys read instructions, to get to the part where they can ignore them. His jaw set. He pushed the letter back like it had burned him. This is ridiculous, he said. It's my education. Don't you care if I succeed? I care if you learn what success costs, I said, and who pays for it. He made a noise, a hybrid of laugh and choke. He stepped back and paced because anger needs to move to feel like progress. So what? You're punishing me because I had fun at a party, because you can't take a joke, because you turned my drowning into entertainment, I said. The words came out steady, factual. Tyler's face went red. I didn't push you that hard. You lost your balance. It was an accident. Was the video an accident? I asked. Was the laughter? He looked away. That wasn't even me posting it. Jessica pivoted. Look, she said brightly. We're off track. This is just paperwork. If we sit down together, we can work this out. The last time we did something together, I said, I drowned for your entertainment. Silence walked into the room as if it had a key. Michael rubbed his temple. Dad, please don't say it like that. How should I say it? I asked. We're a family that thinks other people drowning is a joke. We're a family that turns crisis into contests. No one is making jokes, Jessica said too fast. Emma is, I said. True ones. They froze. It is difficult to weaponize denial when the town has eyes. Tyler's mouth curled. Who cares what she says? People who want to hire you. Michael muttered, the HR call still stuck to his ribs like a bruise. Enough, Tyler snapped. Just sign the damn paper. He shoved the form at me, and I did a thing you only learn how to do when you've lived through harder rooms than kitchens. Nothing. I let the paper hang there in the air, like an accusation without a place to land. He dropped his arm. He wasn't used to gravity winning. Sign it, he said again, but the force had leaked out. Not this, Masad, I said. I took the form, folded it once, then again, and slid it under my coffee cup. I won't sign convenience. If one day I support your education again, it will be to reward character, not to subsidize contempt. Tyler laughed. A short, mean sound he'd learned somewhere that didn't have my fingerprints on it. You act like you're some saint. You're just a stubborn old... Tyler, Michael barked, too late, too soft. I turned away before the rest of the sentence happened. You don't have to listen to profanity to know it by scent. When I faced them again, they had rearranged into a different geometry. Tyler furious, Jessica offended, Michael terrified of the Monday already in his inbox. Here's what's true, I said. You have asked me to give you access. I have said no. You have my answer. I will not argue it. You'll regret this, Tyler whispered. And for the first time in weeks, I heard the boy. He used to be the one who feared consequences because he had only just learned the shape of them. I already regret a great many things, I said. This isn't one. My phone buzzed. Thomas Anderson. Ed, he said without preamble. Monday at 2 p.m., conference room with the Peppermints. They'll hear you without you being present. I looked at my family still arranged in their tableau of demand and disappointment. Call them, I said into the phone. It's time. I never believed revenge would taste like silence. But as I sat in the corner diner across the street from Thomas Anderson's office that Monday afternoon, watching the clock tick toward 2 p.m., I realized how much power there was in restraint. At exactly 1:56, I saw them arrive. Jessica first, her heels clicking against the sidewalk with the precision of someone who believes authority comes from sound. Michael behind her, tugging at his tie like it might strangle him if he didn't show the proper respect. Tyler, last hands shoved deep in his pockets, shoulders arranged in that careful slouch teenagers use when they want to appear unimpressed by adult proceedings. From my window seat, I watched them disappear through the side entrance Thomas prefers for days like this. Days when truth should arrive without a parade. I set my journal on the table, pen on top, a cup of black coffee standing guard. The waitress who had called me hon twice and sir once refilled my cup without being asked. She understood the rhythm of waiting. At exactly 2 p.m, my phone buzzed. Nora. We're set. Table, water, peppermints in a bowl. At 2:01 it buzzed again. Mr. Anderson is reading now. I put the phone face down and watched my breath go in and out like a metronome finally tuned. I wasn't praying. I was choosing silence like a man chooses solid ground. Thomas's voice doesn't rise when he holds a room. It's honest, not dramatic. That's why I hired him. Good afternoon. He began his words carrying across the street to where I sat, not through sound, but through certainty. I'm Thomas Anderson. Mr. Carter asked me to read a letter into the record. This isn't a negotiation. It's a statement of fact. Where is he? Jessica asked. She doesn't like schedules she didn't build. Unavailable by choice, Thomas answered. Shall we begin? He unfolded one page, the one I wrote in my own hand, and signed beneath his lamp. To those who assumed my silence meant agreement, I gave everything once. I won't die twice. Nora told me later that Michael shifted in his chair like the line had weight. Tyler rolled a peppermint to the other side of his mouth. Jessica crossed one leg over the other and sat very still. Control prefers statues when it can't conduct the orchestra. Thomas continued steady as a mechanic listing parts. You turned my patience into a surface to skim. You made my breath a story to laugh at. Here is the record. He set the first document on the table and walked them through it with the methodical care of someone who has done this before, who knows that shock requires time to process. The fund. The education fund you called yours is not yours. Effective last Friday, it was repurposed in full to establish the Margaret Carter Scholarship for first-generation students in this county. The custodian lists it as paid. If you ask for access, you will be denied. If you attempt to bypass my client, the log will include your name, and the attempt will be forwarded to this office. Tyler sat up straight for the first time in months. That's not legal, he said, his voice cracking like ice under pressure. It is, Thomas said calmly, and turned the page. The first recipient has already been selected, a young woman named Emma Rodriguez, who demonstrated exceptional character when she chose honesty over popularity. Jessica's breathing changed. You could hear it even from across the street, the way someone sounds when they realize they've been outplayed by rules they didn't know existed. He moved the asset, she said, to the air, to the ceiling, to whatever God protects entitlement, without telling us. The house, Thomas continued without acknowledging the interruption. The lake house remains Mr. Carter's until he dies or directs otherwise. The deed and instructions are executed and held in escrow. Upon his passing, the property will transfer to a community land trust that prioritizes veterans and working families, or be sold for the same purpose at his discretion. This house will not be inherited. It will not be sold for profit. It will serve people who understand the value of sacrifice. That one landed like a physical blow. I felt it across the street, that frequency grief and greed share when they discover they've been humming the same tune. Michael's face went pale. Jessica's hand found her throat, as if someone had just told her she was choking, and she was only now noticing she couldn't breathe. Authority. Thomas read his voice, never wavering. Medical and financial powers of attorney are executed and recorded. In the event of incapacity, all decisions rest with Frank Morrison, failing him with counsel. Do not call facilities on my client's behalf. Do not call banks. His credit is frozen. His accounts require a physical token. Every inquiry pings this office. Michael cleared his throat, that old small gesture from when he once tried to tell the truth early and never got enough practice. We were trying to prepare, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Thomas lifted a second sheet and laid it beside the first, like a diagnosis people hope is wrong. Dr. Sarah Mitchell examined Mr. Carter last Friday. Her letter states Mr. William Carter demonstrates full decisional capacity. He understands the nature and consequences of his financial and healthcare decisions and can communicate his wishes clearly and without coercion. You had him tested, Jessica said, a clean edge on the word tested, as if my mind were a misbehaving appliance. He asked to be documented, Thomas said. We obliged. Then he read the last part, the words I had written in short lines, so breath would do the work of emphasis. You may call this cruel. It isn't. It's clear. You may say I owe you. I don't. You may try to contest. If you lose, you will receive nothing per the no contest clause you've just triggered by threatening to call a lawyer in the lobby. Tyler leaned forward, boy and man wrestling in the same body, for control of his response. "Tell him he's going to regret this," he said, his voice shaking with something that might have been tears if he had been younger, or fury if he had been older. Thomas looked at him the way a carpenter looks at a bent nail. "No," he said. "I'll tell him he is done regretting the wrong things." He closed the folder, pushed the water toward the center of the table. "Peppermint," he offered. At 2:37 my phone buzzed. "Nora, read, done." At 2:41 Thomas, "All as expected. They'll email lawyers. We'll file responses." I didn't answer either message. Instead, I stood up, left money on the table, and walked across the street to where my family was emerging from the building, like survivors of something they still couldn't name. "I'm moving to Riverside Senior Living next week," I said when they saw me waiting by their car. "You have 14 days to make other arrangements." And then I walked away, leaving them to figure out what came after the ending they thought they were writing. Packing at 68 is different than packing at 30. You don't throw things into boxes. You decide what earns the right to take your breath. I started with the small things. Margaret's flannel shirt still hanging in the closet after 3 years because some absences refused to become past tense. The photo of me holding a boy who once brought me dandelions and called them flowers. The paperweight she found at a yard sale, blue glass, with a small bubble inside that looks like a world that stayed intact. Frank Morrison came by with 2 cardboard boxes and a humor that kept its voice down. "I brought the fancy tape," he announced. "The kind that pretends to be stronger than it needs to be." "You always did like overkill," I said. "Overcare," he corrected. "There's a difference." We packed in companionable silence, 2 old men who had learned that some work is best done without commentary. At one point, he held up the old guitar, the one that had once meant Christmas to a 10-year-old boy. "You taking this?" he asked. "No," I said. "It belongs to a boy who's not here anymore." Frank nodded and set it down gently, as if gentleness could do retroactive good. Some objects become monuments to people we used to love, and monuments are meant to stay where the memory lives. Mrs. Patterson from next door appeared in the doorway with chicken salad and the expression of a woman who refuses to let grief skip a meal. "Label your boxes," she said, handing me a marker. "Men always think they'll remember. They don't." "I'll write big," I promised. She looked at the stack of papers on my desk, saw the edges of law and decision, and touched the top page with 2 fingers. "Monday," she said, not asking. "How'd it go?" "Water stayed in the glass," I said. "That's all right then, Po," she answered, as if we were discussing a pie that didn't fall. The night before I left, I sat alone at the kitchen table, the house around me quiet, in a way I hadn't allowed it to be in years. I had written a letter for Michael and left it under his favorite coffee mug. He would find it when he went looking for caffeine, and instead meet his father's handwriting. "Son," I wrote, "I wanted an easier sentence here. There isn't one. I love you. That's not a payment plan. If you want to find me, choose decency first and let it grow for a month, then knock. If you come as a man, I'll answer as your father." Morning arrived like a reliable friend, on time, no fuss. I made coffee strong enough to have an opinion. I cleaned the sink because a sink deserves to be found clean. I left a list on the fridge, not requests, not ultimatums. Transfer the utilities by the 15th. Return the spare key to the glass bowl. Forward your mail. There's a kindness in clarity when you've taken kindness for granted. At 8 a.m. I set my keys on the table in a line. House key, safe, deposit box key, and token. Then I put the house key back in my pocket. Not yet. At the door, I paused. The house had watched me for decades. It could handle one more look. I didn't expect anyone to stop me. That was the point. But Michael came down the stairs just as I put my hand on the knob. He was unshaven and honest in a way men only are when they've run out of rehearsed lines. "Dad," he said. I turned. "Son, you're really going," he said, as if naming it might shrink it. "I am." He swallowed. "I don't know how we got here." "One uncorrected small thing at a time," I said. "You still have time to correct something." He nodded like a man who finally found a church that wasn't selling him something. "I'm sorry," he managed. "I know," I said. "Make it useful." Frank's truck idled at the curb. He didn't wave. He didn't need to. He knew how to greet a man who chose his own door. The drive to Riverside Senior Living was quiet, not the punished kind, but the earned kind. The manager handed me a key without making a speech. "Welcome home," she said, like the phrase should be short and true. In my new room, I placed 3 things first. Margaret's flannel on the hook by the door, the paperweight on the desk, and the photo of a little boy on the windowsill, not as an invitation for nostalgia, but as a reminder. I opened my journal to a blank page and wrote the smallest entry of my life. I chose this. Then I underlined it and closed the book. The phone rang. Thomas Anderson. "Your son emailed," he said. Quote, "Thank you for being clear. I'm working on deserving forgiveness." End quote. Saving for file. I stared at the words until they focused. There are sentences you wait your whole life to hear. They seldom arrive the way you pictured, but they count anyway. That afternoon, another call. "Mr. Carter, this is Riverside Community Foundation. Emma Rodriguez won the first Margaret Carter Scholarship. She asked us to tell you her essay was titled, 'When Truth Costs Everything.' She wanted you to know some of us don't laugh when people are drowning." I sat by the window and watched an old man stake tomatoes 2 plots over. A woman with a walker paused to admire his work, then kept going. Somewhere down the hall, someone laughed the way people do when no one is keeping score. I picked up my pen and began again. Sometimes the greatest act of love is setting boundaries. William Carter discovered that silence isn't weakness when it's strategic, and that walking away from toxic relationships, even family, can be the most powerful choice you make. True strength lies not in enduring abuse, but in choosing your own ending. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If you enjoyed William's story of reclaiming his power, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories of courage and transformation. Share your thoughts in the comments below about times when you had to set boundaries in your own life. What would you have done in William's situation? Click the playlist now showing to listen to our next powerful story about standing up for what's right.